Hey everybody, it's Doug DeFrank here, and I'd like to welcome you to the second part of a three-part blog series on how to integrate Microsoft Visual Studio Code with GitHub. In the last video, we talked about how to install Microsoft PowerShell as well as VMware Power CLI on a Macintosh system. In this video, I'd like to go ahead and talk about how to install Git as well as VS Code. Git, for those of you who don't know, is the background framework or utility that allows Microsoft Visual Studio Code to make calls and update GitHub and vice versa. So what we're going to do is install that first, and then in the second half of this video we'll go ahead and install Microsoft Visual Studio Code. I find it easier personally to install Git first. This way when you do the installation of Microsoft Visual Studio Code later, it already knows that Git is installed and configured and ready to go. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the installation of both utilities.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start this process by installing Git. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and download it. So I'm going to launch our web browser here, and the web address we want to go to is git-scm.com/downloads. And on this page, you can see we have the latest version available for macOS, Windows, and Linux. Obviously, we're going to go ahead and pick macOS. Now, for some reason, I don't know why, it will say here that your download is starting, but every machine I've tested this on, that never happens. I always have to click this, click here to download manually link, which brings me over to SourceForge, and I get the download this way. But it says it happens automatically, but it doesn't for me at least. So anyway, here you have the option of opening it or saving it locally to your computer. I'm going to go ahead and just say open because I plan on installing this right after it downloads. And we can see it mounted here on the desktop, and I have this package file. I'm going to minimize the browser, double click this package file to begin the install, and there we have a warning saying that it's from an unidentified developer. So unfortunately I have to click OK and do an extra step, which involves going into System Preferences and Security and Privacy. And in here I can see that I tried to launch this Git package, but it was blocked. So just click the button Open Anyway, which brings me back to this where I can click Open and pick up where I left off previously with the installer. I'm going to close out of this System Preferences pane, click back here, and continue with the installation. Pretty simple and straightforward here. Continue. Yes, it's going to take up space on my hard drive. Authenticate with my username and password, and it does the installation, and before you know it, boom, it's done. And when I click close, I have the option of deleting this, removing it to trash, which now that I'm done with the download, sure, go ahead and dump it to trash. I don't need this anymore. But even though it dumps the download to trash, it doesn't unmount the package, so I'm going to drag that to trash, and that completes the Git process. So moving on to Visual Studio Code, again, we'll bring up the web browser, and the web address for that is code.visualstudio.com/download. And here, once again, we'll pick the Mac download. After a second or two, we are presented with the same option, download, opening it or saving it locally. I'm just going to hit open because, again, I plan on installing this right after the download completes. So it's going to go through its thing. It downloaded this zip file to my downloads folder and then extracted automatically this Visual Studio Code app. And if I double click this right now, I have a working copy of Visual Studio Code. But for me, I'm actually going to go ahead and drag this over into my applications folder so that it stays there permanently. And there it is. There's really nothing to install. You take the app package, drag it into your applications locally, and that's it. Double click it, and you quote-unquote installed Visual Studio Code onto the Mac. It's going to go through the same verification that it did before that we saw with Git, but because this is a trusted developer, Microsoft, we're not blocked. We instead have this option to say, hey, it was downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to go ahead and open it? To which I'm going to say, yes, open it. And ta-da, there we are. We have Visual Studio Code, again, quote-unquote, installed on this Mac system. Basically, here it is. Code is now installed and running. We have Git installed and running. And that really completes the download and installation of software for this video.
So now that we have Git and Visual Studio Code installed on this macOS system, I'd like to encourage you to stop back and check out the third and final part of this video series where we actually go ahead and configure Git and Visual Studio Code to communicate with or synchronize with GitHub. As always, I'd like to thank you for stopping by and checking out the content. If you found this information helpful at all, please give it a like, stop by and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.